Alright, welcome back everybody. We're picking up right where we left off. Louie, are you eating well? When you were a boy, you were quite skinny. I made sure you clean your plate. Make sure you cook suspicious food before eating it. So, we're about to learn a little bit about Louie now that he's not in our party anymore from his aunt, grandmama, whoever that is, mother maybe. I don't know. She created a bit of a monster, if you will, I think. Then again, that just might be Louie. Louie might just been born a monster. Hard to say. Usually a little A and a little B, you know, where some people are made into the monster that they are, and some people become that because they're unable to rationalize or deal with situations as they are. And again, that's sort of a circular thing when I say that, because if you're unable to deal with regular stuff in this world, I don't know what to say. I would say go get help more than anything. But if you're dealing with abuse some kind, or you're being psychologically tormented in some capacity, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's a cycle thing. It's a complex. You know, they call it generational trauma, but you know what I mean, like you have someone decides to do some evil, if you will, to a person, and next thing you know it, great, they're gonna all die. And next thing you know it, you've got 4 generations of trauma because someone I don't even want to talk about it. In other news, I didn't realize these big fucking bulborbs, apparently, when they hit that size, apparently they get to revive after so long. It's kind of dumb. That's like, okay, I get the fact that you're trying to put challenge into this game, but like, the big bulborbs, if they're not bosses, and they're the biggest bulborbs that aren't, again, like I said, not bosses, does that mean that, why do they get to revive? Sort of my question. I murder them, little soul comes out. Why do they get to revive? I may have mentioned this before in probably some video that's over a year old now. I actually don't know. I mean, I do rewatch some of my videos just to make sure that nothing's really changed about them, but I mean, you're talking about watching them once, period. Not like watching them once a year. Too many of them now. A while ago, I had started looking into what they call business books, investment books, what have you. Not that I'm particularly, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a bad, I tend to be a little, I'm not a day trader, I'm not going to be a day trader, I'm never going to be a day trader, but at the same time, I think I have at least some idea of how to invest. And the issue that I tend to have is, and a lot of this is a personality thing, is I tend to be a lot more conservative than a lot of other investor people are. And so, in a way, you know, let's put it this way, I'd rather be someone who builds their wealth over 30 or 40 years than to be someone who throws $1,000 at a penny stock that no one saw coming, and suddenly, they have their first $1 million. Because there's a lot of people that lose lots of money that way, either because they invest in something they think is going to be the next Google, it doesn't take off, or they end up going bankrupt or whatever. And we like, as I've mentioned before, about people, children particularly, that are prodigies, or they're really gifted in a field. They often put those kids on a pedestal, and they talk about, like, well, this kid was so smart, he could graduate from high school when he was only in the 3rd grade. Yeah, but he doesn't have the emotional maturity for that high school level grade. I mean, there's lots of other things to learn other than strict knowledge. Okay, and a lot of parents that obviously push children. We've had this conversation before, but I looked on, people talk about, well, what would be a good book to read if you want to understand building wealth? And there's a short one that I would recommend for people to read. It's a story, largely a story, but it teaches the best lessons through story, sort of like, your fables, your Bible. It teaches you through story. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole Bible thing again, but the Bible is a nice mix of religion and history and story. It teaches through those 3 different things, through faith and story, and at the same time, it's also recording the history of the Jewish people as they dictated it, from what is your creation story all the way up through and the return from Babylon. But ironically, to what I was just saying, I didn't mean to do this as a transition. This was just sort of a quinky dink. The book that I was referring to is called The Richest Man in Babylon. The Richest Man in Babylon, like I said, is a story. It talks about investing, and they talk about, not, like I said, it's not a very long book. It's about 150 pages or so. Typeface is pretty standard. It's not too tight. It's not too loose. So you should be able to get through that in maybe a couple hours. You could even break it up if you wanted to, a couple days. But I mean, you could get it done reading it for 15, 20 minutes every day for a week or 2. They talk about a number of interesting things in the book. I read this maybe about a year or 2 ago, where they talk about building wealth. And some of the things they mention very strongly is, what do you know? Like, what is your profession? If you're a baker and you want to get into buying and selling of jewels, how do you know that what I'm selling you is the true artifact? I'm selling you rubies, and I'm not selling you ruby-colored glass. And some of that has to do with knowledge. For instance, a baker, presumably, if he's good at his craft, will know how to bake and make pastry and bread and all the whole 9 yards, whatever he or she sells. Okay, but he or she will be perhaps a little ignorant when it comes to buying and selling of, say, precious gems. And precious gems are used in this case because we're talking about a Babylon. We're talking about buying and selling, trading of your services or other materials for gold, silver, and copper. And you have to know the value of something before you can truly understand what it is worth. So, yeah, very much dwells on, you need to focus on the things you know. And then you find someone that you trust that knows about other things, like gems, gold, what have you, and you would not bake him poison. I don't think this is used in the book, but you're a baker, you're not going to bake poison bread. Because no one will come shop at you, even if you do it as a favor to someone to, eliminate an enemy. You'll lose your reputation. And you won't be able to be a baker anymore because everyone will know that you're the baker that made the poison bread. At the same time, that reputation also precedes you. I'm trying to think of how to explain it because it's very easy not to trust people. And building trust with people is a very long, arduous process. Yeah, this is the last cave in this area, which I saw from before it actually gave me the, hey, there's a cave down here. Trust, like I said, trust is hard to build. It's hard to maintain because you make a slip up or you start to have your own self-interest placed ahead of everybody else's, and now you're in trouble because now they can't trust you anymore because you're number one. And while that's not a surprise that you would place yourself number one ahead of other people, it does not make for very good friendship because that means if you betray them for a nickel, you'll betray them, for anything, pretty much. You just basically. I think the phrase is if you betray him for $1, you'd betray him for a nickel or something like that. You either would or wouldn't do it. Either the money's worth way too much to you, or your friendship is worth way too much to you. But some of the things, again, like I said in the book, Richest Man in Babylon, they talk about is, how do you build wealth? Well, you build wealth because you get to know what it is that you're buying and selling. You don't get rich because, you go and find a really awesome deal on something, and then you turn around and go try to sell it. We don't know what the value of that item is worth. So in a lot of cases, in this day and age, what I'm trying to refer to is stocks and bonds, CDs, the places you can take your money, invest it, in the hopes that money will grow and become more money. And my big thing with investing has always been knowing what I'm investing in. Do I have confidence in what I'm investing in? And my downside is I never know when to sell. That's my downside, because if you have a stock and it starts to take a plummet into the garbage, what do? Well, it hold some of the stock when times were good, then the losses don't mean anything to you because you've already gotten your original investment back. So you're not really losing anything through the investment. But you think about, I have 1,000 shares of a $10 stock, and all of a sudden that stock goes down to $5 a share. You lost half your value. You can still recoup half of it at that point, plus or minus whatever dividends you're either having reinvested or being paid out to you. We're going to try to get to this, I think we're going to make it, but we're going to try to get to the underground area here. Yeah, I got enough time, great. I just have to have them close enough to me for them to count. Okay, great. So we're going to go down in the cave here. Sort of a side note to the topic I'm talking about. And we'll pop back up. We'll be basically at the end of the day. But so that's always the issue with stocks, and it's risk. Everything, stocks and bonds is a risk. Well, stocks mainly is a risk, because if you sell at 500 and the stock goes back up to $10, you lost half its value. Now, if you wait on the stock could go back up. You could then sell it for whatever its normal asking price is, $10, $11. A lot of people, what they're interested in is they're not interested in the dividends. The stock pays out, but they're interested in taking the money that the stock provides you with shares. So again, $10, however many shares you bought, equals the amount of money you have invested in. That's right. What they're looking for is they're looking to buy a $10 stock that's going to go up to $20, so they can then sell the $20 stock at what they hope is its apex. And then from there, they take the profit they made, they reinvest it in a different stock that they're hoping will go from being $10 to being $20. Or depending on how greedy you are, you can easily go from $10 to $1,000, or what have you. And there's other things in stocks that a little more complicated. The one that everyone talks about more recently was when some big hedge firm investors tried to short GameStop. The way a short works is sort of the reverse of an investment. So if I buy stock, the idea is that the stock will go up in price. So if I buy at $10, it goes up to $12. I make $2 per share of the stock that I have. Fair enough. Short is the opposite, where I'm basically saying I am buying these stocks with the express notion that they are going to lose value. I'm going to short the stock. So there's a better way of explaining this. It's actually more accurate, but basically what you're saying is I want to buy 100 shares of this stock in a week. But I'm going to put my money down right now, and you're going to pay me the difference. If the stock goes down, you're going to pay me money. If the stock goes up, I'm going to pay you money. Now, I made that sort of simplified. I simplified the way that works because I'm sure there's more stuff to that than just, well, I'm gonna make the bet that in a week's time this is going to go down 10 points. Something like that. I'm sure there's some sort of thing where you're betting on a nearly daily basis that the stock's going to go down. So every time it ticks up, you're paying money out of your pocket, and every time it ticks down, you're getting money into your pocket. Theoretically, I guess. I don't know. I'd have to look at that a little bit harder than I've done. But the other thing that, and I'm getting off topic again, one of the other things that the richest man in Babylon talks about, which is fundamental, is the idea of putting away money. What do you have to put away? You put away what you can, and then you invest that money. And you try to find the safest place to place that money that produces the largest return on that money. So, for instance, if I've got $100, I've got $1,000, okay, and I put it in a savings account, and that annual yield is 1%. They're gonna give me 1% on my $1,000 per year. Okay, so every year I have that in the bank, I'm gonna get, let's see here, what would that be, $10 at 1%, I believe. So that'd be 1,000 would be 100. Yeah, be about $10 a year I would get back in stock. I mean, in dividends. Okay. Now, I'm not sure you can find a bank that'll give you 10% or 10% or. Did I say 10%? Yes, I said 10%. Oh no, I said 1%. You could probably find a bank that'll give you, I would say, a savings rate, but you'd have to have a decent amount of money in there for 1%, I would say. Now, if insurance or credit rates go up, i.e., they go from being like 2.5% or 3% or 4% up to say 10%, then the banks are able to then give you better interest. So then all of a sudden investing your money in the bank makes more sense because they're giving you a higher rate. So the banks have ways of sort of handling this. I'm not going to get too in depth with it, but basically that number I gave you, 1%, it's based on your average of that month. So for instance, if you have $100, if you have $1,000, you take $10 out. Now you have, $990 over the course of the month. That gets averaged out, and then they pay you the interest based on that average dollar amount. Okay? Now, on the other hand, you could take that money, invest it in the stock market. You'll probably get a better return depending on what you're investing in. But the idea is you want to try to get as much out of it as possible in terms of a return. Now, different ways of doing that, obviously, in the stock market, including you go with your dividends. We're going to pay you 10% not 10% dividends, but 3% dividends. Yearly. We get to use your money to invest. Blah 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 blah. The stock goes up. You can sell our stock, get your money back. You'll lose your, the dividend that you would get if you kept the money with us, but you're welcome to take your money with you at the profit you made, etc. But you can't get the beginning capital money without putting something aside. Now, for the rich, it's easy. Not easy, obviously, because usually the rich own businesses. They got to make sure that business is producing wealth for them. So they're reinvesting a lot of their profit back into the company so it can then produce more wealth. That part makes it difficult, but in a lot of cases they have a lot of wiggle room between the amount they need to reinvest in their company, the amount that they need to live, the amount that the profit the business generally generates after they've paid all their expenses. So when you have excess money, whether that's a penny, $1, $1,000, $1 million, you want to take that money, put it aside, not spend it, and invest it so that money can then work for you and build more wealth. And that's sort of what a 401k does. You're putting a certain amount of money aside. The company's putting a certain money. I got fucked. Shouldn't have done that. I should have just taken the bottle cap and ran, but that's okay. We'll figure that out later. But that's where a lot of people sort of fail this system. And I understand everybody's situation is different. I get it. You work a 9-to-5 job and your wife doesn't work or whatever, and so you're the only breadwinner in the family. I get that. That's going to make it more difficult. Now, if you're making, say, $50,000, $100,000 a year, and you're the only bread provider, you're doing a little bit better. You're probably doing a little bit better than, say, a dual income household that's making, say, $60,000 or $70,000 a year. I say that I understand what you're going to say. You're going to say, oh well, if I'm making $50,000 a year and these two guys combined are making $60,000 a year, I'm missing out on $10,000, plus or minus taxes. What are you talking about, Chris? But what I mean by that is, if you're the only breadwinner and you're bringing in $50,000, you're probably living within that $50,000 means, okay? Whereas if you have a dual income, you're probably spending a lot more of that $60,000, i.e., 2 cars, traveling, parking, gasoline, expenses, maintenance, etc. You have a lot more money going out when there's 2 of you. I mean, when you're both having to travel for work is what I'm trying to say. More expensive there. Now, that doesn't mean that the wifey or the husband in the situation that is not working doesn't need a car or doesn't need to get around or doesn't spend money or doesn't feed the children the same way that a dual income household does. I'm just saying that there's a lot more stuff that can get done when one person works and one person stays at home. You can work on the house, you can work in the garden, you can do other things. You know what I mean? I don't want to assume that people who don't work just sit on their ass and watch television all day, eating pork rinds and drinking beer. But I understand. I understand when you're saying, well, it's, I mean, what's $10,000 extra dollars? $10,000 extra dollars minus tax. You know, why wouldn't why wouldn't the two be better than the one? I agree. But again, like I said, there's more incentive to spend when you have two people working, whether that be work clothes or the need to get to and from work. I think I would imagine that if you're both being very conservative or fiscally responsible with your money, I still think that making $10,000 less with only one person working is better than two people working and making $10,000 extra dollars. Now, obviously, that number start to fall away from that the less money that you're making. So if I'm making, me and my girlfriend are making $60,000 a year together, and you're making $50,000 a year, I think we're more or less about equal. If we're making $100,000 a year as a couple, you know, and you're making $70,000 a year, I'm not 100% sure that we're not doing better at that point, because, you know, at a certain point we have extra disposable income, which then again allows us, if we're being fiscally responsible, to invest more of that money and then have that money come back to us in terms of investments, stocks, bonds, that sort of stuff. But I would highly suggest you read The Richest Man in Babylon if you get a chance. It is lots of wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom in there. And the book was written in 1926, I think. First published in 1926. Yep. It's got a lot of truth that not only made sense back then, but still makes sense today. And I think a lot of people are too caught up in spending money, keeping up with the Joneses, credit card debt, whatever. Gotta look good. Doesn't matter how much it's gonna cost. Doesn't matter how much I'm gonna have to work to hit that level. Instead of living less lavishly and having more money to actually use whenever you need it, and not have to worry about it. Alright, well, I'm gonna cut the episode here. I know we're mid battle, but we're about 30 minutes in, so I'm gonna cut it here. We'll be back in just a sec.